Texas. Anyway, I say this regularly, but I just want to say it again, this is a wonderful place to come. I get asked to Sunday school at a variety of places, and the receptivity both to the message and to me here is really unparalleled. And Russell, I was really thrilled that this is the first time I've come here and Russell has been here. Yeah, let's plug that. Anyway, so thanks for inviting me. And what I want to talk about today, I've used up my kind of regular things that, though I could pick stuff about Hinduism and Buddhism, which is my specialty, talk about. For the last few years, and I'm representative of a kind of movement, have gotten interested in what's called in academia contemplative studies. So what I want to talk a little bit about today is what it is, what we're talking about, some reasons why I think it's valuable, so I'm going to kind of be a missionary for it, and then some possible cautions, and finally I'm going to end with a contemplative exercise that is proven to be something a lot of people like. Anyway, so people have been meditating for millennia, and that goes together, those two ends, meditating. But it's only quite recently that academic types have begun to study it, both within traditional religions and well beyond them. And my academic home base, the American Academy of Religion, has only recently organized a session or seminars about contemplative studies. And then even in this region, we have only started in the last couple of years to have meetings with any regularity. So what is contemplation is not one of those questions where someone answers simply. It's kind of an inquiry, and I'm really into that. I know you all are, you like settled answers. Did I play that wrong again? Anyway, so it's growing not only in religious studies, but also in psychology and neuroscience, literature, visual and performing arts. So it's really a coming thing. It's exciting for me kind of toward the end of my career to be with something that's a wave that's starting to crest. It's very important and really growing in the healthcare field. Hospitals and many other related facilities are looking into yoga, tai chi, meditation, other practices to see how they can contribute to human wellness. Some of you may have heard the most famous, this is called MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, kind of John Kabat-Zinn. If you haven't, you will. So it's exciting for those who have committed their lives to sort of the study of traditional Asian religions to look at clinical scientists studying mindfulness, compassion, and seeing how it can be brought into the American mainstream. So I'll mention in a minute, I have a really good friend who is part of this movement down at MD Anderson Cancer Center, which is a great example of a really cutting-edge, obviously, medical center, to teach yoga and tai chi, various things, to people with cancer to see how it can help them. I'll say a few more words about that in a minute. So, since I've managed to dodge what is contemplation already, maybe I will say that. There's a lot of different ways of knowing and understanding the world, different ways of focusing attention. Some of them have been within religion, some of them outside. So I'll just make a little list. So you may have already been doing contemplation. Sitting or walking meditation. There's meditation with eyes closed, but also moving. There's breathing, what are called mindfulness exercises, yogic postures, people doing various kinds of visualization, silent prayer, group chanting, nature walking, many others. Anyway, so these things are called spiritual or religious or neither. So it's really a pretty big umbrella. So one of the things I put in my blurb when I was trying to think of a title said, well, why should one do such practices? Or what's in it for you? That somehow draws people. I don't know if that's good. Anyway, so first of all, there's obviously a variety of ways of knowing ourselves better. Contemplative reflection is one of those, to know ourselves and to know human existence more generally. And then there's also something that's very high value to understand other people better, to know what people have been doing meditation, religion, contemplation for a long time in many different cultures. And so I really hope that it's a kind of deposit of human wisdom, human knowledge that should be more widely available. And so for us to not only come to know ourselves better, but to know other people better and what they found of value, that's something that studying contemplative traditions can really bring to us. And then as an academic, the fact that we can know how we think, what we think better, that we can critically reflect both on our personal insights and on the wisdom of other peoples and other cultures, all of that is to the good. So, and then as a doctrinaire liberal, I have to confess that when people do this reflection, it may allow them to challenge social and cultural norms through these reflections, find some new models for how to do things, because the world may not be working perfectly pleasantly. Anyway, so that's the first thing I want to say to argue for it. It's clear now that they're doing these empirical studies in scientific arenas that the evidence is that contemplative practice does, in fact, enhance our ability to concentrate, to introspect, the sort of the depth and quality and strength of our attention, and capacity for critical reflection. Obviously, to have a calm and centered mind is something that will be fruitful when you leave that calm and centeredness, and when you're in it to critically reflect with more understanding. One of the ways we also see this is in everyday life, and I'm sure you've seen it, can see what I'm about to say in your current life with stress, relieving stress, or bringing restfulness. One of the things that we talk a lot about now in the academic arena is both the boon and drawbacks of technology, the social media, and the diversions of modern life. Finding students who will sit and listen for more than 15 minutes without getting shakes to get their device to look at what they miss on Facebook. I'm not talking to anybody here, of course. You've heard of such people. Anyway, and then there's this thing that is spoken about a lot, is praised, and I think overpraised, the idea of multitasking. And some of you may know this, but you can't multitask in terms of having more than one thing in the foreground. You can have things, one thing in the foreground, and be distracted by all this other stuff in the background, or you can flip back and forth fast and then not get everything of either of the things you're flipping back and forth at. But one of the things that culturally we are learning, and it's reassuring me that some of the students are starting to get this as well, that the inability to concentrate is really a drawback. And then there's also this sense of the word, we use the word productivity, which is another word that's very instrumentalist. So I hope while you're thinking here, you're wondering, is this a productive use of my time? Because that really should be the measure for everything. Sarcasm? Anyway, so final thing I want to say, because this is one of my little hobby words about meditation. You say, oh, you meditate, oh, you fall asleep a lot? And actually, I do fall asleep sometimes. But if what meditation is about is getting me more in touch with what is present, and you are sleep deprived, then to fall asleep is an appropriate action. If you find yourself doing that all the time, then handle your sleep issue and then meditate. But it's an example of something that, if contemplation is about bringing you more to the present and having insight, and your moment, or from moment to moment, you're living kind of in a fog of sleepiness, then that's bringing you more clarity. Insight and more rest. So it's just looking down. So one of the things we call this often is sort of the valuable thing of being silent, restful alertness. We call that downtime. That was downtime. No, that may be quite up. So, let's see, one more argument is that it can enhance our ways of noticing many forms of human relatedness. And this starts to get a little bit more in that mystical stuff. But how are we connected? How are the different parts of ourself connected? How is that connected to the natural environment, to the built environment around us? How are we, in fact, related to the world? Many cultures have made the argument that there's not only a physical connection among us, but there's a metaphysical beyond the physical connection. Well, if you do contemplation, you're going to reflect on that. There's a mystery in life, but is there there is mystery in life, but is there a mystery with a capital M? And what is that mystery? There's certainly coincidences, but have you ever had a coincidence? Like, somebody gets off the bus here, and you get off the bus there, and or many other circumstances where the odds of that happening were tiny, but yet they happen. So do we write that off in the scientific model as well, all the stuff that happened maybe? Or is there something underneath there that's more harmonious, congruent, etc.? Finally, the thing is, one of the things you think about with contemplation, you certainly have a mind. What is the mind? And how are our minds totally separate? So if you're one of those people like that, don't do contemplation for that. Do it for all the prior physiological reasons. But it does open up that mystical stuff. Okay, how many different kinds of contemplation are there? I used it broadly, but just let me run through quickly. If we talk Hinduism, you've heard of mantras like Om, like that. That's a way to contemplate. Yoga, the various postures of yoga, but actually yoga in Hinduism is much more elaborate than that. There's living a right moral life, the posture and the breathing, and then there's certain kinds of exercises that may actually even give you what they call supernatural powers. There's devotional chanting. Some of you have probably heard the Hare Krishnas, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, like that. That's a way of contemplating. There's in Buddhism the idea of vipassana, the mindfulness. There's practicing ethical procedures. And this, actually, I talked about this once, but we have to go back and say it again. Because it's a learning I had that a kind of contemplation is, and we're going to do an exercise in a minute, but to be compassionate to others, to feel sympathetic joy with them, to have equanimity among them, that's a practice that could be more rigorous than sitting like this. To be that way with others. In Pure Land Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, the idea of visualizations of various realms and deities, all of these things are contemplation. Oh, well, Zen, of course. What is the hand of one hand? What is the sound of one hand clapping? Right? Actually, ask me back another time and I'll tell you about that. There is an answer. Sort of. But I also want to underline Christianity has a long history of various contemplative exercises. The Eastern Orthodox Jesus Prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Now you can say that in a kind of cognitive way and think about it, but you can also get it like a mantra into a kind of chanting mode. Or St. Ignatius' exercises of purgation, illumination, and union, and a long-term practice. Quaker sitting in silence. And then there's, of course, Jewish Kabbalah, there's in Islam something called Zikr, remembering the names of God. And all these things are ways to settle oneself in a contemplative environment. So before I do the exercise, I want to talk about one more thing for a couple of minutes. And that is that while I really want to honor this being across culture, it's also important that we recognize that different religions say these aren't all the same. And if we're going to honor them, we have to agree with them that there's different rituals, there's different doctrines, there's different social institutions. And if we don't honor that, this is a word we sometimes use in contemplative business, if we don't honor the differences, and we may be just doing McMindfulness. Yeah. So let me mention this has really come up in this at MD Anderson, where I have these friends who work in their integrative medicine program, and their main goal is to do stress management and improve the mood and so on of cancer patients, doing these mind-body practices. And they have affiliates in India, in China, and so they just use the language like stress reduction or yoga, just meeting postures or relaxation. But there's actually a whole world here behind this. And they have to dance with, well, are we dishonoring the worldview? I'm not letting them know all ethical practices or communitarian practices. So they're working on that. And again, it's exciting for me and my career to be with something that's just growing and to be part of that conversation. So they have found that it helps with sleep disturbance, that yoga does in fact help people physically, that there's psychological benefits from this Tibetan yoga and relieving depression. So anyway, so good things are happening. They're just starting to happen in the DFW area. And just this past spring, we had a workshop at TCU where we brought in a couple of people, and I did it with the nursing program. And so I think there's a really hopeful sign. But again, let me say, it is, as someone who is, I don't want to be too much of a pedant about this, but someone who spent his life studying all these things, the training to be a guru is not the same as being a professor, is not the same as being a therapist. And so those things overlap, but they're not all the same. And we have to be careful, especially if these practices have power. You know, if they really can make a difference in people's lives, then you really ought to have the training to have some mastery. Enough, but I have a lot more I can say about that, but I want to go on to the exercise. Okay, so this is a sort of a Buddhist exercise. One of the things that you've heard me speak before, there's some of Buddhism is clearly a religion, but some of it is just like the way the world works. And so you don't have to really believe anything about it, though I know you all believe the same stuff, and you're really ruthless about that here. Yeah. So anyway, so what I'd like to do, this is called a metta, M-E-T-T-A, or loving kindness meditation. So what I'd like you to do is just sit comfortably like you are. Maybe if you straighten your spine, that'll help keep you awake. Not that you fall asleep on me. And just sit and breathe. And breathe calmly. And often people find closing their eyes is helpful, but there's no mandatory thing about this. And then as you're sitting calmly, maybe with your eyes closed, breathing, drop your focus into your heart area. And just breathe for a few seconds. Take a few breaths in and out. Breathing from your center around your chest. And now I'd like you to recall the time when you felt love deeply. temperature zone you feel neutral about, maybe run into a store regularly, say a weight person. So, may you be happy. May you be well. Okay, I'm assuming you just like. Not too much. May he or she be happy. May that person be well. May he or she be at peace. Now let's let this radiate out to everybody in the room. May we be happy. May we be well. May we be at peace. Let's go for full breath. May we be happy. May we be happy. May we all be well. May we be at peace. Not everybody in the world. May they be